Hello and welcome to the Django DRF project, eCommerce. This tutorial is part of a series of tutorials which you can watch for free. The link to the YouTube course playlist is in the video description. This course is also available on Udemy, where you can watch the course ad-free, download the tutorial source code, and access all updated tutorials and playlist. The link to the course, which will always provide the best price, can be found in the video description. Even though we are building our own personal projects here and we are working predominantly locally, we are going to set up and configure our environment variables in preparation for when we start to, for example, deploy our application and need that little bit of extra security. To give you a basic understanding of what an environment variable is, if we go into our DRF project and our settings, here we have some, in our base, for example, here we have some constants, here some variables, and this is storing some very important information, for example, our secret key. Now, if we were to connect our Django project to a database, for example, here we're just using an SQLite database, but if we were using, for example, Postgres database, we would need a username and password here, and that's really some sensitive information that we're adding to this local file. So to avoid us having to place sensitive information such as username and passwords and secret keys in plain sight, and which is accessible within a familiar area in the settings area here in this file, then we can go ahead and within our local environment operating system, we can go ahead and create some environment variables. And essentially what we're doing here is we're storing variables outside of our program, which we can then hook into within our program and use. Using environment variables means that we can store our sensitive information away from our application. We can store it out of our files, our modules here, and that provides a different or another layer of security. Imagine if someone were to infiltrate or get access to our source here. It would mean that potentially if we had our secret key here in plain sight, as well as username passwords for databases, that would be easily accessible. Now, by utilizing environment variables, which are essentially outside of our program and stored within our and managed by our operating system, it means that it just adds another layer of security. There are many different ways for us to manage our environment variables, both within our local environment and the production environment. Now, here I've chosen to utilize Python.env package, which is essentially going to allow us to load environment variables from an env file. So it's going to take over and do everything for us in terms of managing our environment variables, but we can simply manage them as a developer in an EVM file. And although they will be in a file and they will be in our package or project at this point, what we're trying to do here is simulate the idea and prepare our project in preparation for when we actually deploy our application. We will want to actually install these environment variables separately and differently, but we're extracting them away from our main project in a way that helps us prepare them and get them ready for when we do actually deploy our application. So let's go ahead and actually install this package here. This is on the Python package index. So I've just copied this, copies the command to the clipboard. So I can now go ahead and just pip install. Now make sure you're in your virtual environment. So pip install python.env, and there we go. Just to get rid of this notice so it doesn't come up again, I'm just going to go ahead and pip install upgrade pip, just to upgrade pip so that doesn't get shown again. That's just going to update the Python package manager pip that we're using to install software. So I'm going to make a record of this. So for example, in my commands here, just add that in to my commands, save that, and then I'm going to record the fact that I'm going to install this package called python.env and then the version number. If you haven't used PyPy before, Python Package Index, then you won't know about, there's lots of information here which will help you out. So most of the time, there's a link on the left-hand side, homepage, or the documentation, which will take you to a page where you can go ahead and just read through the documentation in terms of initial installation and setup. So this one just takes you to the README file. It doesn't look like it has a separate page for documentation because it's not necessarily a massive package. So we just need to know how to get this working. So we're told to get started, we just need to install. Sometimes we need to add to the installed packages in settings, so installed app, in Django. So that's something that typically we'd need to do in some packages. So that isn't the case for this. We just need to go ahead and create an env file. So we need to do that first, and then we go ahead and just load .env in, load up the environment variables, and then we can start utilizing them. Right, so nice and simple, hopefully. So let's go ahead and add our .env file. Now this is going to be in the outer DRF eCommerce folder where the manage.py file resides. So let's go ahead and create a new file here, .env. Okay, so then we need to decide on what information we want to store in our environment variables. So I think we're going to place the secret key. So what we can do is, for now, we can just copy this. And let's go into the environment variables here. So we're just going to add this in. Now we don't need the single doubles, so let's remove those singles and doubles. So there we have the secret key. So that defines the secret key. You can see the format here, key value. So secret key equals. Now we can test this because although Django will start the server without a secret key, when we try and access a web page, it should cause a problem. So let's just test that out first to make sure that is true. So I'm just going to remove the secret key from the base file. Let's go ahead and run our server. It was quicker just for me to type it in, it looks like. Yep. Okay. So Python 3 or /manage.py. So make sure you're in the right folder and then run server. So you can see the server does run. So let's just access that. So you can see that when we try and access the holding page, because we haven't changed any pages yet in our server, we get a server error. So that just concludes the fact that a secret key is required for our Django project to work successfully. So now we know that is not working. We now need to hook everything together. So let's go ahead and do that next. Right, so for this, we simply need to make sure that we follow the guides that was provided. So we're going to need to, within our base file in settings here, let's go ahead and from .env, let's go ahead and put load.env. So we load everything up, and then we just need to run the load.env method, I think it was. Just check out the documentation. So load.env, so we load that up. Essentially what's happening here is it's going to grab our environment variable file and then go ahead and load that into the environment variable so that we can then go and access them. Right, so let's now try and access them. So let's go back into our local. This is where we had, so let's just do this in the base. This is where we had the secret key. So anyway you like, let's just place it right here. So now we can try and access our secret key. So secret key as per normal. So that's the constant name, secret key. And now we need to load in our secret key. Okay, so what we need to do is import OS. So we're going to need access to some of the tools that are provided by OS. So this allows us to interact with our operating system, OS. So we bring those tools in, and now we can say os.environ. So the environment variables, and we say get, and then we can then decide what we want to get. So in this case, we want to get the secret key value. So we go ahead and reference the secret key. So now we can test this out again. So from the terminal here, let's just run the server again. It looks like everything is running okay. So maybe no syntax errors. Refresh the page and you can see that our Django server is running, which is telling us that Django has found our environment variable and is loading in our environment variable here on line 9, and everything is working okay. So at this point, it's just rinse and repeat in regards to identifying what else we want to include in the environment variables, adding them in, and then you can now see the approach to take to actually load them into our constants in our settings file. So as we move through the course, no doubt we'll keep revisiting this and add additional settings to our environment variables. So just to summarize, if you need that, in a kind of high-level way here, what we have here is environment variables. So these are variables that are stored in our operating system. We could take an approach, and you can explore this yourself, the fact that your operating system behind the scenes have environment variables or variables that can be accessed by other programs, and you can access them whether you're on Windows or Mac, you can see those. So what's happening here is that we are simulating the idea that we are going to add these environment variables to the operating system so our application can access them. And by placing the environment variables there, it just adds a layer of security. It means that we can avoid having to type out in clear text passwords within our application. So here, obviously, we are using an environment variable file just to make things a little bit easier to work with while we're working here in the local environment. But again, this is just allowing us to set everything up, because as soon as we move across to our production server, we know what environment variables we need to set, we know the values, so we can remove this file, set the environment variables, and we should be good to go because everything else in our project has been set up. So the application that we installed, the package that we installed, is essentially going to load our environment variables in, and then we can then use a traditional OS approach here to grab and access our environment variables and return those values.